It all started, well, to be more accurate, it started to end when a certain member of a certain cult, whose history we will unveil today, had enough. After having her arm amputated for a reason so ridiculous that, in fact, I don't think any reason could justify chopping off an entire arm just like that. The reason in question? Not meeting pastry sales targets. The woman's name is Gabrielle Lavallee. After being pinned down for 45 minutes before having her arm removed with a chainsaw by her beloved Roch Thériault, she figured enough was enough. She had to escape. But where? First, her condition wouldn't allow her to go anywhere, and second, they were in the middle of a mountain. At this point, desperation couldn't even find its way into her mind. Pain had taken up all the space. So Gabrielle waited for her golden opportunity. She already had a plan. When the chance came, she sneaked into a room where Roch kept a phone and used it to call her brother, informing him of her situation, including her location. Luckily for her, her brother acted fast, notifying the police. Soon after, Roch was apprehended, revealing the true face of the Ant Hill Kids cult. What once seemed like a group of peaceful hippies living in the mountains was soon exposed, cementing Roch Thériault's place in Canadian history as one of the most brutal cult leaders ever. This is The Unseen Circle, and you're watching the full story of the Ant Hill Kids. Yes, Roch Thériault. To be honest, it's hard to wrap your head around the person he was and the things he did. Should I start from the beginning or go straight to where the massacres were happening? Maybe a mix of both would do. I don't know if I'm a bad researcher or what, but every source seems to say something different about the man. So if any of you notice inconsistencies, feel free to let me know. How about we do this in a somewhat chronological way? It won't take long. You see, despite Roch's later testimonies when police interrogated him, he was quite persistent in claiming he had a traumatic, abuse-filled childhood. Born into a working-class Roman Catholic family in the Saguenay Valley of Quebec, life wasn't easy, especially when his family moved to Thetford Mines, where, at the time, the local school only went up to the 7th grade, ending his educational journey at the age of 13. But from my point of view, since I'm writing the script, meaning I've already researched the whole case, I know for a fact that Roch was a habitual liar and attention-seeking, gaslighting piece of shit. The abuse by his father claim? A lie. Why? Because all of his siblings denied that their father was abusive, but on the other hand, Hyacinth, Roch's father, wasn't an angel either. He was a member of a Roman Catholic organization called the White Berets, which distributed literature door to door and preached a radical brand of Catholicism. This was a task Roch despised. In fact, he hated it so much, being forced to wear the white beret uniform and go door to door, that he was often bullied by local kids for his involvement with the group. This experience left a lasting mark on him, shaping his views on authority and control, ultimately leading him to renounce Catholicism at the age of 18. Francine Grenier was the woman Roch would end up spending 7 years of his life with, having 2 children together, Roch Sylvain, born in 1969, and Francois, born in 1971. However, things didn't work out between them, and for reasons no one could blame Francine for, she eventually left him. Everything was fine until he fell ill, which became another life-altering experience that further shaped his descent into madness. After dozens of doctor appointments, medications, and surgeries, his exposure to the medical world pushed Roch into studying human anatomy and how the body works, especially after the medical field left him with dumping syndrome. According to Google, this is a group of symptoms such as diarrhea, nausea, and feeling lightheaded or tired after a meal, caused by rapid gastric emptying. These factors piled on top of each other, turning Roch into a short-tempered man who would get upset over anything. And with a twist, he was now a self-proclaimed doctor. Or at least, this was the first step toward becoming one. After reading a couple of books, Roch suddenly considered himself the next Dr. House. Back to our topic. Life with him became unbearable, and with that, Francine filed for divorce. Less than a year later, in 1975, Roch met his new soulmate, Giselle LaFrance. Although I read somewhere that he had been cheating on Francine with her, this is one of the details I'm not entirely sure about, so take it with a grain of salt. Moving on. Feeling lost and empty after renouncing his faith, Roch found a new passion in the Seventh-day Adventist Church, SDA. particularly in its teachings on healthy living and the apocalyptic doomsday. This aspect captivated him so much that it became his entire personality. At this point, Roch had gone from strict conservative to human anatomy enthusiast, something that was evident in his heightened sex drive with Giselle, marking a complete 180-degree shift. And once again, he didn't just change his own life but also Giselle's, as she was living with him at the time. Soon, his presence within the church became obvious. His passion for the message and his bilingual tongue secured him a teaching position, further boosting his ego. As Roch gained a reputation for successfully helping individuals quit smoking during his workshops, Adventist leaders assigned him more responsibilities. They put him in charge of running anti-smoking seminars, which he excelled at. These workshops were not only profitable. Participants paid what they could at the end of each session, but they also paved the way for Roch to assemble a core group of followers who shared his zeal for saving themselves from the impending apocalypse. Through these seminars, Roch met Pierre Zita, a Guadeloupean Adventist minister. Under Zita's guidance, Thériault began organizing meetings in a local motel room every Saturday. Here, he preached to a small but dedicated group of followers about his visions and their impending role in the end times, planting the seeds of what would soon become the Ant Hill Kids cult. During this time, Roch's enthusiasm for his chosen path unsettled the other Adventists. His boastfulness about his limited education and his belief that women were inferior to men further irritated them, eventually prompting his expulsion in 1978. After leaving the SDA church, Roch moved to Saint Marie de Beauce, where he and his followers established the Healthy Living Clinic. At first, as the name suggests, it somewhat aligned with SDA teachings, but with a twist. Roch's newly adopted conservative values were quickly discarded, and once again, he became fixated on the women in his group. Despite Giselle's desperate attempt to stop him by putting a ring on it, it didn't matter to him. One woman wasn't enough. When she tried to intervene, he punched her and locked her in a room. Strangely, this behavior didn't push Giselle to leave him. Quite the opposite, she stayed. In the spring of 1978, Geraldine Auclair's health was deteriorating due to the leukemia she had been battling in Quebec City. Seeking an alternative approach to healing, her husband admitted her to the Healthy Living Clinic, placing her under Roch Thériault's care. Roch wasted no time convincing her husband to remove her from professional medical treatment, claiming that his methods would heal her. His so-called therapies were a bizarre mix of organic foods and extreme practices. One of these was spiritual cleansing, which subjected Geraldine to brutal, dehumanizing acts. Even her own father was forbidden from visiting her, a clear indication of Roch's growing control over his followers. During her short stay at the clinic, Geraldine endured unimaginable cruelty. She was forced to fast for long periods, while Roch simultaneously fed her a diet he claimed was rich in nutrients, we're talking grape juice by the way, but ultimately contradicted her medical needs. Eventually, Geraldine succumbed to the abuse and harsh conditions. Roch's followers later claimed that she awakened from the dead after he performed an unorthodox resurrection ritual. However, the truth about her final moments remains shrouded in mystery. In his delusional state, Roch had convinced himself that he was a divine instrument of salvation. His justification for Geraldine's death, and those to come, stemmed from his sickening belief that such brutality was necessary for spiritual ascension. In reality, Geraldine Auclair had been robbed of her life in a gruesome display of misguided devotion, leaving her family to mourn the loss of a loved one at the hands of a deranged cult leader. After this tragedy, the group relocated to the Gaspé Peninsula, following Roch's claims that the end of the world was near, specifically February 1979. And of course, being the chosen one, he insisted they had to settle at the base of a mountain he called Eternal Mountain. The group rebranded as the Holy Moses Mountain Family, HMMF, and members began addressing Roch as Moses. Then, out of nowhere, the Jonestown Massacre happened. Authorities were on high alert for any cult-like groups, and one of those under scrutiny was the Holy Moses Mountain Family. Soon, police raided the commune where Roch and his followers lived, enforcing a court order regarding one of his followers, who was forcibly taken to a hospital for psychiatric evaluation. Roch himself was brought to trial on charges of obstructing justice. He was found guilty and given a suspended sentence, but the trial only drew more attention to him and his cult. Before long, the commune became a tourist attraction, with curious outsiders eager to see how these people managed to live such a primitive life. For Roch, everything was smooth sailing. His followers now addressed him as Moses, he assigned them biblical names, and he enforced a strict dress code. He also granted himself the freedom to have sex with any woman in the commune, all while subjecting his followers to relentless physical and psychological abuse. His grip was tight. No one dared to defy him. After all, he was their prophet. Even after his prediction that the world would end in February 1979 failed to come true, he quickly justified it as a mere miscalculation, claiming that God's time worked differently from human time. 2 years passed. By 1981, Roch's rule was as strong as ever. But in March of that year, another life was lost, this time a child. His name was Samuel Giguère. Samuel's death was the result of Roch's growing delusions of being a healer, combined with the blind obedience of his followers. At the time, one of his disciples, Guise, was responsible for watching over the children Roch had deemed impure. Meanwhile, the pure members of the commune were gathered for a large banquet in honor of Roch's 2 oldest sons. Samuel, just 2 years old, began crying from stomach pain. His wails disturbed Roch, who viewed it as disruptive. Instead of comforting the child, Roch ordered Guise to silence him. And Guy, being a man of limited intellect, blindly devoted to his leader, did what was expected of him. He beat the toddler to a pulp. When Samuel's condition worsened, Roch stepped in, not as a savior, but as a madman playing doctor. He attempted to treat the boy's injuries with stomach injections and, for reasons beyond logic, performed a circumcision. The crude procedures led to a fatal infection, and Samuel died. Did Roch take responsibility? Of course not. He pinned the blame entirely on Guise. Vere, who had intellectual disabilities, was an easy scapegoat. Roch seized the opportunity to reinforce his authority, painting Vere as a devil, an impure being responsible for the child's death. The cult, already steeped in fear and psychological manipulation, accepted this version of events without question. And Guy, being simple-minded, believed it too. Convinced that he had to purify himself, Guy Vere offered up the ultimate sacrifice. He begged Roch to castrate him. The castration itself was a brutal affair. Roch used a pair of rusty scissors to sever Vere's genitals, leaving him writhing in agony as he bled out on the floor. Miraculously, Vere survived, and when he finally escaped the commune, he went straight to the police. Authorities, already keeping a close eye on Roch, wasted no time. They raided the commune, arrested Thériault, and placed all the children in protective custody. 7 members of the cult were charged for their complicity in the death of Samuel Giguère and the castration of Guy Vere. But somehow, whether through legal loopholes, manipulation, or sheer luck, Roch received a shockingly lenient sentence. He served only 9 months to a year in jail. During that time, the remaining members of the commune were evicted by forest rangers. By 1984, Roch was released, and in his mind, the entire ordeal had been nothing more than a test from God, a way to separate the weak from the faithful. Those who had remained loyal, all 22 of them, were deemed worthy. With this group, Roch relocated once again, this time settling on a remote plot of land near Burnt River, in the Kawartha region of Ontario. It was here that the cult rebranded itself as the Anthill Kids, a name Roch claimed reflected their tireless work ethic. Just like ants, he said. But in reality, this new chapter marked the beginning of the worst horrors yet. The abuse would escalate to levels beyond imagination. Fortunately, these would be the cult's final years, but not before a series of horrific acts unfolded, starting with the brutal death of Solange Boilard. It was 1989 when Solange complained of stomach pain. Rather than seek medical help, Roch took it upon himself to heal her. The so-called surgery began with him laying Solange naked on a table. He punched her in the stomach, then forced a plastic tube into her rectum, administering a crude enema of molasses and olive oil. That was only the beginning. He then took a knife, sliced open her abdomen, and, without any anesthesia, reached in with his bare hands and tore out a piece of her intestines. To close the wound, Roch had another follower, Gabrielle Lavallee, stitch Solange back together using nothing but a needle and thread. As if that weren't enough, he then ordered the other women to shove a tube down Solange's throat and blow into it. By the next day, Solange was dead. The damage was too severe, but Roch refused to accept it. Claiming he had the power of resurrection, he demanded that her body be exhumed. In a grotesque and deranged ritual, he had his followers saw off the top of Solange's skull. Then, in an act so depraved it defies reason, he ejaculated onto her exposed brain, believing it would bring her back to life. Of course, nothing happened. Solange remained dead. Defeated, Roch had her body buried nearby. But this was far from the last of his horrors. And then there was Gabrielle. Of all the torment Roch inflicted on his followers, Gabrielle Lavallee endured some of the worst. It wasn't enough that her infant son had died of exposure to the cold. Roch made sure her suffering didn't end there. As punishment for not selling enough pastries, he forcibly extracted 8 of her teeth. When she developed a stiff finger, he treated it by stabbing her hand with a hunting knife. The wound became infected, gangrene spread, and then came the amputation. Not just her hand, her entire arm. Some sources claim that this was the moment she finally realized Roch was not a prophet, not a healer, but a madman. But by then, she was too psychologically entangled with him to simply walk away. Stockholm Syndrome, they call it. Luckily, it didn't stop her from reaching out. At some point, Gabrielle managed to get to a phone and called her brother, giving him all the details he needed to alert authorities. Some reports say he acted quickly, immediately informing the police. Others claim that after the amputation, Gabrielle escaped the commune by hitchhiking to the nearest hospital, where she was questioned by investigators. Either way, it didn't matter, because that phone call, that moment of defiance, was what finally brought Roch down. For several weeks, he evaded capture by hiding in the woods. But on December 18, 1989, the nightmare finally ended. Roch Thériault was arrested and charged with the second-degree murder of Solange Boillard, along with aggravated assault for amputating Gabrielle's arm. He pled guilty and was sentenced to 12 years in prison, though in 1993, that sentence was extended to life after he lost his appeal. Even behind bars, Roch remained as deranged as ever. He claimed the Pope had granted him sainthood. At one point, he even escaped from a psychiatric ward, though it didn't last long. He was initially housed in a maximum security prison but was later transferred to a medium security facility, where he became a constant problem for staff. Inmates despised him. Guards had no patience for him. Over the years, he racked up more than 150 disciplinary infractions. Then came February 26, 2011. That morning, Roch was found dead in his cell at the Regional Rehabilitation Center for Addicted Offenders in St. John, New Brunswick. He had been stabbed multiple times by his cellmate, 59-year-old Jacques Bieland. Bieland, who was also serving time for murder, claimed that Roch had made racist remarks and had attacked him earlier that day. But some believe it was premeditated revenge long overdue. Given the severity of the wounds, it wasn't hard to imagine. The official investigation concluded that Bieland acted alone. But was that the full truth? Or was there more to it? Either way, it didn't matter. Roch Thériault, the self-proclaimed prophet, the abuser, the murderer, the monster, died the same way he had lived. In violence, in blood, and in darkness.